This week, the world remembered two horrific genocides. It was Holocaust Remembrance Day yesterday for the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis during World War II. Earlier this week, the commemoration of the genocide of Tutsis in Rwanda that began 27 years ago. It's estimated that close to 1 million people died in that genocide. The Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre is exhibiting photos around both these blots on human history. To discuss, we're joined by the founder and director of that centre, Tali Nates. She is a historian specialising in genocide in the 20th century. Tali, Ms. Nates, thank you so much. This is obviously close to your heart, that we don't forget. Looking at this week, how these days were commemorated, do you think that the world is remembering?
It was such a tough week, actually. We started Genocide Awareness Month this 1st of April. And in this month, we are remembering so many genocides. On Wednesday, we started the 27th anniversary, Kwibuka 27, remembering the start of the 100 days of genocide. And of course, yesterday, we remembered Holocaust Remembrance Day, of course, the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. After the Holocaust, the world said, never again. Yet, Rwanda happened, and not only happened, it happened in April of 1994, when we in South Africa were voting in our first democratic elections. We were so happy, we were celebrating, yet already for 3 weeks, in Rwanda, 3.5 hours flight away, thousands and thousands of men, women, and children were butchered. So, do we remember and do we make the connections to bring memory into action of never again? I think this is the question that we need to ask ourselves specifically this week.
Yeah, and I mean, there are even claims of people being targeted based on ethnicity in Myanmar, claims in Africa today.
Absolutely. That's the reason for me, as a daughter of actually survivors, when I hear that never again, that is said so many times, I know that it is never again until the next time, or never again with a question mark, because genocides happened throughout the 20th century. Of course, in Cambodia, in Armenia, in Namibia, in our neighboring Namibia in 1904, there was the genocide of the Herero and Nama people. So genocide did happen and is still happening, sadly, in our world today. And you mentioned Myanmar, and of course, the United Nations recognized the Rohingya massacres as a genocide.
Yeah.
So we are still struggling with this terrible man-made disaster.
You're right, it's absolutely man-made. In South Africa, I mean, are we taking care of the education of children around this issue? I mean, what sort of support as well does your centre get in this country?
So our country is actually quite progressive around looking at confronting difficult past. In 2007, the Education Department decided to include in the curriculum a study of difficult pasts, including Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, including Rwanda, including, of course, apartheid in South Africa, colonial rule in South Africa. So we are perhaps a bit more advanced than other countries that are afraid to confront their own past and afraid sometimes to look at very painful past. I do think, as an educationalist, that it is of the most importance to actually study history. We should study history because history gives us warning signs. We can recognize when extremism is on the rise. We can recognize when dangerous speech and hate speech is starting. Because, of course, we can certainly learn from the Holocaust and from the genocide in Rwanda that targeted the Tutsi population there, that hate speech many times translates to violence, to mass atrocities, and ultimately many times to genocide. So education is key. And we at the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center are teaching school learners, also educators, teachers, students from universities, and we work closely with the Department of Education to make sure that the curriculum that does offer study of those atrocities is followed, and that the learners are making connections between the past and today. Our challenges today in South Africa, may it be racism or xenophobia or other challenges that we are facing today.
And the campaign, hashtag It Started With Words, is that effective to reinforce what you're saying, that it started with words? The use of the word cockroach in Rwanda. And the next thing, 1 million people killed, most brutally. But on the other hand, I mean, some people say that what we're seeing is a backlash against people who police other people's words and thoughts that may have even led to support for the former US President Donald Trump in the US.
You are so right, because first of all, we have to take into consideration freedom of speech. But then we have to look at dangerous speech or hate speech. And the thin line between them is sometimes very, very difficult. So let's look at Rwanda. Let's look at the propaganda mechanism that was working for years, discrimination, prejudice, making Tutsi children, for example, stand up. So teachers in the school will say, who are the Tutsi children? And force them to stand up, and everyone will boo them and humiliate them. Words like snakes, like cockroaches, the use of radio, the use of magazines, of course, the infamous hate radio RTLM in Rwanda, that not only spread the hate speech and the propaganda against the Tutsi, but also during the genocide, even directed the genocides, the killers, go to this address. This family is still alive. Go and finish the job. You know, you need to go and get rid of those others. And this is dangerous. And we do need to remember that it always starts with words. Nazi Germany did not start with the gas chambers. Auschwitz was not established in 1933. So the minute the words are there, the minute we hear people in power using these words of snakes, cockroaches, others, get rid of them, they are not part of us, us and them, I think we need to pay attention. You mentioned, the United States, but we can look, in many, many countries, how extremism is on the rise, how, targeting of the other, may it be Asians or African people or, Muslims or Jews or women or LGBT community, maybe the targeted group is different, but the words, the dangerous words, the hateful words are for us to note, because sadly they can turn into actions and into killings.
Ms. Nates, this has been such a great discussion. We're running out of time, but your late father was a Holocaust survivor who was saved by Oskar Schindler. So incredible history there. Before you go, please tell us how that was discussed around your family dinner table, how that was remembered, your own family history.
Thank you so much, because this is really in memory of my father, Moses Marion Turner, that was saved together with his brother, my uncle, by a Nazi, a German, Oskar Schindler. They were part of now the famous Schindler's List. But my grandmother, my aunts, they were only 12 and 16 years old. Helen and Zilla were murdered by the Nazis, and the rest of the family was murdered by the Nazis. My father was a tortured soul. It was hard for him to speak. He was really traumatized by the events that happened to him. My uncle was the speaking one, the one that adopted me and spoke to me. But my father taught me lessons. He said to me, I was saved by a Nazi. I was saved by a German, because people have choices. You cannot put people in boxes. You can choose to act. You can choose to be an upstander. And his lessons and his sort of values carry me today in my work in the Holocaust and Genocide Center, that is a place of memory, education, dialogue, and where lessons for humanity are learned.
All right, well, thank you for sharing some of your history with us, and we really appreciate the work that you do. That was Tali Nates, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center Director and Founder.